Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bidami and this is Hogwarts Legacy, a third-person action-adventure game developed by Avalanche Software and published by Warner Bros. Games in 2023, February 10th, if I'm not mistaken. And similarly to the book series that enabled the creation of this game, its sales numbers are doing well, at least on paper. Because I doubt anyone sane would buy this game after the gameplay reveal. There is nothing new or interesting about this game. It's just a generic open-world game where you craft items you will never use and then level yourself up to get 10% more damage. The only difference here is you're a wizard, so melee fights are a no-go. And this is just the basic summary of the gameplay. We haven't even touched the PC performance yet. But when we do, trust me, you'll be pulling your hair out. But that's a story for later. First things first, let's take a look at the numerous controversies that are surrounding the game as it is. And to be honest, I think this is one of the major contributing factors as to why the game is such a high seller. And while we're on the subject, did you notice that every major Warner Bros. Game that was released in the last couple of years had a controversy or two attached to it? Just take a look at Shadow of War and its positive review agreement that enabled you to actually review the game before it got released. Or Arkham Knight's terrible PC port. Or Shadow of War's loot boxes. What I'm trying to say here is, it seems like Warner Bros. Is actively causing controversies in order to increase their sales numbers, so consider your next purchase carefully. Anyway, let's go back to Hogwarts. Most, if not all, controversies associated to the game are actually the result of J.K. Rowling's tweets or viewpoints, which is idiotic because she has nothing to do with the game itself. She didn't produce the game, she didn't write the game's story or the characters, she was just responsible for the world that the game is based off of. But somehow her views on transgender people and the way she depicts goblins in the books is reason enough to go and boycott the game and bully other content creators. What's even stupider is that some of the developers of the game are actually supporting this. But what do I know, I'm just a random guy on the internet. Anyhow, let's take a look at the PC port of the game. While the game will run on the PC, there is a myriad of problems that we need to address here. The unstable frame rates, the terrible loading in of textures, the load times themselves, character models clipping through each other or other objects, and there is also some side content that is exclusive to the PS5 platform. While these issues are not game-breaking, they do deteriorate my experience with the game itself. I've lost count on how many times I just took a single step and the whole area around me turned into a muddy mess. The textures will load up after a few seconds, but the mess that remains looks like... Actually, no it doesn't. It makes PlayStation 1 graphics look detailed in comparison. I've tried to mitigate the problem by lowering my graphical settings, but that didn't do anything. And the recently released patch for the game didn't help much either. The only thing that I noticed is that the frame rate drop frequency is lowered. So instead of losing frame rates every 10 seconds, I lose them every 15 seconds. But aside from graphical problems, the game world itself is nice to look at. I really love what the developers did with Hogwarts and its surrounding areas. It really makes you feel like the books are coming to life and that they're blending well with the movie scenery that we saw in the Harry Potter films. Not to mention that the sound design itself is contributing a lot to the immersion. The noises coming from nearby villages, the fields, and the forest really sell the idea that these are lived-in areas, not just background window dressing. I think I already mentioned this before, but I'll repeat it again. A good sound design can make or break a game. You can have a well-designed and animated weapon in hand, but if it sounds like wet tissue paper hitting rock, nobody will take it seriously. So I'm really glad that the dev team put in the extra effort to make everything sound like it's supposed to. A fireball spell sounds like there's a ball of fire in my hands that's waiting to explode. An invisibility spell sounds like I'm lowering my volume and visibility, and a rock skin potion that I drink makes it sound like I'm growing rocks on my body. The animals I meet and interact with sound like unique creatures with their own body movement and voices, and the same can be said about human characters. They are all well voice acted and have unique voices that makes them memorable and, I won't say likable, but I still memorize them and can tell who's who by the voices. Although there is a slight problem with the sound mixing. It's not a bug as far as I know, but it is irritating when you notice it. Sometimes the voice lines will play over each other too early, or they will not play at all and they will start mid-sentence. So be aware of that. But otherwise, the sound effects are generally okay. The only other gripe I have with the game is that the character models look like wax figures, one more degree away from melting away completely.
What can I do for you?
To be fair, most video games these days have this similar problem. They try to make their characters as realistic as possible, and they end up with a very off-putting character models that nobody wants to look at. This is mostly because they want to make a cinematic story, so they want to have as realistic-looking characters as possible, but if the main focus is not the story, just focus on good gameplay and give us a unique graphical style. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and everyone else's. Just look at Shadow of Mordor or Batman Arkham Asylum. They went for a realistic look of the characters, but they still have that fantasy or comic book-like aesthetic to them. Certain body parts are either exaggerated or minimized or caricatured in a way that makes them feel like they're natural. I know it doesn't make much sense, but just take a look at those games and you'll see what I mean. But my main point here is, those games help me with the suspension of disbelief. It makes it easier to believe that my character can pick up a rotten mango from a pine tree in the middle of a desert, and then throw it at some random person in Alaska with pinpoint accuracy. And that's the game's biggest problem. It's trying way too hard to be realistic, and by doing so, it shot itself in the foot. I can process giant spiders and humans as enemies, but when I see goblins or other magical creatures, nothing. My brain just starts thinking about something else. I can partially believe that magic is part of the game, but when I see magical creatures and goblins, no, there's a disconnection. Which is concerning because the goblins are a major part of the story. A rather predictable and bland story, but still a part of the story. Which revolves around a piece of wood and a collection of quirky yet one-note characters that will be your friends and mentors. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about them. The characters will show up when the story dictates, they will have a personality that's one note, and only show up for stuff that's related to that personality trait of theirs. And if you're lucky, they might even show up to help you on the mission. Most of the time they will just show up for a cutscene and then just stare at a wall or something. I mean, you will walk with them and they will talk to you, but when the enemy attack you, you'll be on your own. Seriously, don't rely on partner AI to help you because they're next to useless. You're the main target for every enemy in the area, and no matter what your partner does, it will be more of a detriment than help. They just use basic attack spells and occasionally break the enemy shields. Which is boring, considering the fact that they all have some established personality traits and backgrounds. For example, one of my classmates likes to experiment with potions, and they have a tendency to explode in his face, or have different side effects. Which opens the door for a lot of possibilities. Our friend created a new potion and wants to test it out. So we head out into the woods and tried on a nearby spider. The said spider might turn into a frog, or grow 10 times in size and become immune to magic. And that's just the basic idea. Now imagine what would happen if the said friend was a party member, or at the very least a merchant. It would contribute to the gameplay with variety, and it will also make an interesting story on its own. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Hogwarts Legacy suffers from the Chosen One storyline. Which is a shame, because the game is set during an interesting time period for the Wizarding World. There is a full-blown Goblin Rebellion going on, but it will not be successful unless my character is captured or killed. Not because I have some vital information that could turn the tide of the rebellion, it's because I'm capable of seeing and using ancient magic. Which also serves as a good excuse as to why am I starting off Hogwarts as a 5th year. Yes, it is as far-fetched as it sounds. But considering my character needs to know some advanced spells, it makes sense narrative-wise, so I can't suspend my disbelief on that one. But what I cannot ignore is the fact that my character is perfect in every way, shape, and form. People automatically like him, and everything he does is immediately successful. And no matter what I do, there'll be absolutely no consequences for my actions. I can skip classes for as long as I want, and I'll still be the top student, or use a killing curse in front of a professor and then walk out of the classroom. The only thing that will happen is that the professors will give me an annoyed reprimand and then move on with their lives. They won't try to disarm me or restrain me, they'll just move on like nothing happened. And it's really immersion breaking because the usage of dark magic is usually a big deal in the Wizarding World. Basically, you have a situation where an 11-year-old boy brings and then everyone wonders. I understand this is a common occurrence in America, but this game is set in Scotland, and people there tend to react to with some modicum of caution, police force, or a swift kick into the genitals if you aim it at them or somebody they care about. But I digress. What I'm saying here is, people will react negatively to weapons and forbidden curses. But in this game, that's not the case. They just ignore you and let you do whatever you want. Which is not only irresponsible, but completely idiotic. Not only from the narrative, but also from the gameplay standpoint. These spells were created to hurt, maim, kill, and mind control someone into doing something they usually wouldn't do. So there should be some level of punishment if you try to use them. And I'm not talking about a cooldown timer. I'm talking about actual horrors, professors, or dementors coming after you. If nothing else, certain side quests and activities should be locked off if I use those curses. It would benefit the game immensely if something like this was implemented. But the story dictates everyone loves your character, and that must be obeyed. This would be a problem if the story was interesting, but as I said before, it's just a generic chosen one story where your character has to do something grand and everyone automatically likes him. I just show up, talk to someone random, and automatically we're best friends. Or at the very least, we become chummy enough so they can ask me to break into someone's house. Which wouldn't be a problem if this was a linear action-adventure game with a predefined character. But this game claims to be an RPG. And in role-playing games, you need to create your own character's background, personality, and morality. And the said background, morality, and personality usually dictate how people in the world around you will react to you. And most of this is usually tracked by algorithms that pay attention to your dialogue options and decisions you make throughout the game. But in Hogwarts Legacy, it boils down to two simple answers, yes or no. Yes, I'm going to do this, and no, I'm not going to do this. And if you're lucky, you might even get, okay, I'll do this, but I'm not okay with this. No matter the choice you make, it will affect nothing. People are still going to love you, they're still going to do business with you, and they will still claim you're the most fashionable, nicest, and every other positive adjective you can think of. That's going to be you. If you backstab someone, they're just going to walk it off and pretend that never happened or mope about. They will not try to get even or do something that might inconvenience you. You're the main character, and you're not supposed to be hindered. Which is counterproductive because interpersonal relationships and conflicts create the most tension and add the necessary flavor to the story. But unfortunately, Legacy's main focus is, this character is from Uganda, this character used to be a man but he's now a woman, or she, I have no idea how to call it at this point anymore. Basically, the focus is on diversity, not on solid characters. Which is a shame because there are some character moments that I really enjoyed. For example, when I first met Professor Ronan, who teaches charms, he was such a jovial, lighthearted man that I couldn't help but smile along with him. And I really enjoyed his lessons, so I couldn't wait for the next class. Only to discover that this was it. Any further interactions with the professor were just a small side quest that would teach me a new spell, and afterwards I just got to ask him a few questions about his backstory. Don't get me wrong, I still love Professor Ronan as he is, but I really wish there was more classes and lecture-based missions rather than roam around the world and enter hidden dungeons where you might get killed. At least for the first half of the game. Just focus on lectures and character development. It would make the whole story 10 times as interesting. But the devs wanted diversity, and now we have this. Professors that teach you spells that aren't related to their subject, and a large empty world with boring characters and uninteresting side quests. And that's the most polite way I can describe it. It's just a big area sprinkled with enemies and a few dungeons. There are quote-unquote puzzles, but those are just timed shooting galleries or use one specific spell until it gets boring type of affair. There are a few gems that really make you think about what you have to do, but those are few and far between. Not to mention that my incentive for solving the set puzzles is usually just extra inventory space. Which is ridiculous because the in-game explanation for these places is they were created to help people master spells. So you'll have to forgive me for thinking that by completing the set challenges, I would unlock the improved version of the set spell. But no, I got another inventory slot. Woohoo! But I digress. The map is visually beautiful to look at, but there is little to no substance to it. Every place of interest is already marked on the map for you, so you just have to choose whether you want to walk, fly, or teleport towards it. Granted, if you want to teleport somewhere, you have to activate the teleportation area first, but once you do that, it's just going to be teleportation from one place to another. Which kind of kills the purpose of the open world aspect of the game. You don't have to put in the effort to actually get somewhere. There are no distinguishing landmarks you have to memorize, there is no fun in traversal, and any other surprises you might come across are just pointless encounters with enemies that will lead you nowhere. They will just reward you with the arbitrary number of experience points and maybe a few gold pieces, and then they will send you back on the same road you were on. You won't discover a shortcut or an interesting side quest, not even a dungeon, you will just go back to the same path you were on and forget the whole encounter in a few seconds. Tell me honestly, would you call that experience fun? Just for argument's sake, I'm going to propose an alternative. Let's pretend you're limited to Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. Two separate maps, but they have more things to do in them. For example, Hogwarts has more shortcuts, which are infested by giant spiders, gnomes, and other creatures of the darkness, and maybe bullies that attack you on sight. Prefects roam around and punish you for misbehaving, and professors and their lessons are minigames that you have to complete in order to unlock new and powerful spells. Hogsmeade is a big village with its own routes, rules, and shops, and local troublemakers that you have to deal with. And before you start yelling, "This is Bully from Rockstar," yes, I'm aware of that. But it's the first thing that came to mind when it came to open world games with a school setting as a theme. I just wanted to see which one of the two ideas you find more appealing. Anyway, let's finally take a look at the gameplay itself. It gets the job done, but it won't do anything memorable. You run around, fight things that try to kill you, collect loot and experience, and then go to a shop to get rid of the unwanted items. And maybe talk to a couple of NPCs for additional quests. Which is all well and good on paper, but there's nothing unique about this, and that's the problem. This game is supposed to be a Wizarding World sandbox, with a plethora of spells that can help you create unique solutions to different problems. But this game just wants to focus on action and combat, so most non-combat spells are limited to a specific area. Which wouldn't be too disappointing if the combat was actually engaging. But everything boils down to roll out of the way, block, and counterattack, or just attack. Which isn't so bad on its own, but the game is really focused on levels and level differences, so you won't be able to do any damage if you're under level, even if you're good at dodging and countering. And that's honestly the biggest problem I have with the game. It just lowers the standards so much that everyone can be good at it. It's not about changing your tactics and approach to the situation or the problem. It's all about, oh, grind more, you'll kill them off with bigger numbers. That's not a good combat system. That's just poor man's Diablo with a different camera angle. I'm not kidding. You only have, I don't know, 5 or 4 enemy types, and they all have slightly different attack animations. And apart from humans who can use color-coded shields that break if you hit them with a specific spell type, there's little to no difference between these enemies. They all do the same amount of damage, they're all equally brain dead, and apart from bosses, they're only dangerous if they come at you in large numbers. And even then, if a melee unit starts an attack animation and you dodge it, they will teleport to you and hit you, so numbers don't mean anything, at least when it comes to enemy capacity. The only numbers you should be worried about is your damage output and damage protection. And while the leveling up process will increase the set numbers, the biggest difference will come down to which outfit you're wearing and which upgrades that you put onto it. Thankfully, your outfit's appearance can be changed to suit your own preference, so you can change the armor piece you're wearing into a very fashionable robe. Unfortunately, the said armor pieces always come in abundance, so you have to find the nearest shopkeeper in order to get rid of them. You can destroy them, but you won't get any parts or upgrades for a different outfit. And before you ask, yes, there is crafting in the game, which is as useful as it sounds. No matter which armor part you create, you will find something twice as powerful 5 seconds afterwards. The only thing crafting is good for is potions, which you will use once or twice and then save them for the boss fights, and then forget to use them. And honestly, I think this last part kinda summarizes the whole game. You will play it and then forget about it. It's not really a memorable experience when it comes to gameplay. The enemies will just use basic attacks and occasionally immobilization spells or bombs, but those things can be dodged or deflected, so it's not much of a threat. The only reason you might get killed is because you're under-leveled or if you just stop paying attention. Or the game bugs out and the enemy spawns in the middle of a tree or a rock and they can attack you without any repercussions. It's not a common occurrence, but it did happen enough times to become noticeable. And these are mostly random encounters you come across while exploring the world. When it comes to story missions, you're screwed! If the story dictates that you've been spotted, you are gonna get spotted. It doesn't matter how stealthy and how under-leveled you are, the enemies will keep pouring on top of you. And you're not allowed to leave the area until every single last enemy is defeated. And that's the annoying part about story missions. There's an abundance of scripted fights that you will have to either participate or try to get out of. Sometimes these events can be really spectacular and fun to watch or participate in, but sometimes they give you the wrong idea about the gameplay itself. For example, I was doing a mission in the woods and a troll attacked a group of dark wizards. While the mages were dealing with the troll, I snuck past them and stole the artifact that was stolen. I thought, cool, okay, I could probably do that in the future, and try to kite the troll towards a group of dark wizards. Boy, was I wrong! So yeah, the combat is not the strong suit of this game, and neither is the stealth. The AI is simply not designed for it. They can patrol around and notice you on occasion, but they won't raise any alarms if they spawn an unconscious body, they will not react to you unless you hit something specific, and they won't even react to escaping prisoners. They'll just walk around and discuss something evil they were doing, or shout random threats even though they haven't spawned. Which can be rather comical when the said threat is said by someone who is calmly walking past my position. But what makes things weirder is the fact that Warner Brothers has access to the Nemesis system, which is a system that keeps track of your interactions with enemies. So for example, if you fight someone and then run away, the said enemy will evolve and become more resilient to specific spell types, and become proficient with specific spells. Not to mention he will reference the last fight when you fight him again. There are a few additional elements that the Nemesis system brings to the table, but for a more detailed analysis, take a look at Game Maker's Toolkit or Monolith's game development journals or documentaries, if you can find them. But I digress. The main point here is, Warner Bros. Has a patent for this system and they're not using it. It would add so much to the gameplay and actually make me care about the fights. As it is right now, the only thing I'm doing in the game is spamming the attack button and using bullet-throated spells to break someone's shields or do some basic stuff. And that gets boring really quickly. Sure, there is ancient magic and magical plants that I can use, but there are only 3 in total and they function as follows. The deployable turret, the minefield, and the stun. And none of them are very useful in the fight. The turret will fire when it feels like it and do a little to no damage. The minefield, again, will do no damage at all. And the stun plant, well, actually that's kind of useful, but its usage is limited. And it doesn't stun bosses, so it's only good against crowds of enemies. Which isn't so bad, but I wish there was more applications for it. And as for ancient magic, well, that's just a flashy one-hit kill for most basic enemies and a pretty big damage deal on true boss enemies. You build it up by creating combos and fighting for a long period of time, but by that point the fight's almost over, so it's kind of useless. Okay, it will do some damage in the boss fight, but it's not really end-all be-all spell that will end the fight in a few seconds. You'll still have to do a lot of dodging, blocking, and occasional QTEs in order to win. And no, you cannot use a broomstick to fly away from the boss or gal of the arena. It's impossible to fly indoors and it's sluggish, so you're gonna get killed before you even take off. And apparently, casting spells while flying is impossible. The only thing you can do on the broomstick is fly up and down and speed up a bit in order to pop balloons. And that's about it. There's no actual racing, there is no Quidditch. The only reason we have it is because it was in the books and movies. Okay, it makes traversal from point A to point B a bit more convenient, but it's barely faster than walking, and once you discover the Flu network, you're not going to use it, let's be honest. Same can be said for collecting magical creatures. The in-game explanation is that you're protecting them from poachers, but you're just collecting them for the free resources, which cannot be traded in for money or any other resources. They can just be used as crafting materials. Granted, you can sell the crafted items, but the point is, the creatures are next to useless. You cannot summon them to fight with you, you cannot release them somewhere else, you can only use them as material generators, once you feed them and pet them. And that's about it. You just have to feed them once and pet them and tell them they're a good boy or a girl. And boom, you get indefinite materials. You don't have to pay attention to their habitat, their feeding requirements. You just pop them into a room and that's it. And as for the mounts, oh, they got the worst end of it. You just keep them in a bag and pull them out whenever you need a ride somewhere. You don't have to feed them, clean them, pet them, or even put them in the room of requirement with the rest of the animals. It kinda kills the purpose of caring for magical creatures. It just turns it into a boring collectathon, which you must participate in order to upgrade yourself. And not in a fun way. You just open a menu and choose which spell do you want to upgrade first. This doesn't make much sense from neither the gameplay nor the story perspective. I'm attending school. There should be a cutscene where a teacher tells me that this spell has an AoE effect, or shows me that the spell has an AoE effect. Or at the very least, the upgrade should show up on its own because I used the spell enough times. It shouldn't be available just because I collected 10 pages from a textbook, with a completely different spell. It ruins the game's pacing, and it also makes the whole school aspect of the story redundant. Why should I bother learning something if I'm already a master of it? And don't get me started on the inventory upgrades. Those are far worse. In order to unlock one inventory slot, you need to collect a specific amount of items. And the said items are most definitely not household goods. And when you collect them, you need to go into a menu to confirm that you want to unlock the said inventory slot. And it's not even shown on your character model. You don't get an extra pocket or anything, you just open another menu and see an empty inventory space. And that's about it. If collecting things wasn't tied up to the progression in the game, I wouldn't even bother. Honestly, I wanted to add something more to this, but I'm done. This game is not worth the asking price of $60, nor is it worth $30. From a visual standpoint, it looks magnificent. The Hogwarts castle and its surrounding environment look like a perfect blend between movies and books. But unfortunately, that's the only positive thing I can say about the visuals. Some characters will catch your eye, but when you realize that most of the character models look the same and they just have a different clothing and hairstyle, you'll stop paying attention to them. The story is practically non-existent and it revolves exclusively around your character. Until your character shows up, nobody will lift a finger to do anything to progress the plot. The gameplay can be fun in short bursts, but if you play it for an hour or longer, you'll realize that it's very boring and shallow. At least if we compare it to Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, or better yet, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Those are 20 or so old games, and I still remember and play them fondly. And I'll happily replay them when the opportunity presents itself. But I cannot say the same thing about Hogwarts Legacy. Once I finish this game, I will uninstall it and never play it again. And that's sad. Instead of evolving and improving the formula that was present since 2003, game development is regressing. The main focus is all about politically correct storylines and not the fun gameplay, which is what the games are supposed to be. A fun pastime you can enjoy with your friends and family. But now it's all focused on 10.9 kill-death ratio, or this character did not feel comfortable in its current body, so he changed it into the opposite gender, or became a kitchen sink. And that's where all the money goes. Into diverse casts of boring characters and no gameplay. Honestly, as things are progressing, I wouldn't be surprised if we have another video game crash similar to the one we had in 1983. But that's a discussion for another day. What I want to end this video with is, wait for a sale or borrow the game from someone who has it. Don't waste your money. This game is only successful due to controversy and nostalgia. It really isn't worth its current asking price, neither the half of it. If you have younger siblings or children that want to play Harry Potter games, go for the LEGO video game adaptations. They're cheaper and you can play them cooperatively. And also the original games are abandonware at this point, so you can probably find them online. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you very much for watching. My name has been Benemy, and I'll see you all in the next video, which will hopefully come out soon. Thank you for watching, and good night.